Hi guys, so Meta has released a bunch of new llamas, and not only they're kinda cool, but also commercially relevant. And the last part is not exactly a given, because most AI releases are like, oh look at this, we scored this many points on that test. But the AI is just not really worth using. It's kinda like overpriced and not very balanced. And a good way to conceptualize how they are kinda setting it up is LLaMA 4 Behemoth would be like Gemini Pro, LLaMA 4 Maverick would be Gemini Flash, and LLaMA 4 Scout would be Flash Lite. And in this case, Flash Lite would be capable of 10 million context, which is a first. In fact, even over 2 million would be a first. As far as I know, yeah, 2 million was the highest so far. And unfortunately, they are not that accessible for self-hosting because you will need a H100 GPU, but it is possible, I suppose, unlike many. Also, they managed to score pretty damn high with Maverick, so it does show its potential. But this benchmark is more about feel. But this is still a good example that we have a GPT 4.5, which is supposed to be the feel model, and that is properly destroyed by now. So this benchmark is not about just specific tests, but you get some replies and you pick the one you prefer. Not necessarily the one that is objectively better. Which I personally tend to not value as highly, but it is still pretty important that you have a smooth communication between you two. Especially if the user is not that technical. Or at least not looking for a very technical conversation. So let's look at Maverick. We are skipping over the tiny details here. And essentially they are positioning Maverick against Gemini 2 Flash. In fact, I'm a little bit surprised that they just put it straight next to Gemini 2 Flash. We can see even score-wise, even by their scores, that it is competing with Gemini Flash, and they also mentioned that Gemini 2 Flash is cheaper. So that's an interesting piece of information to share, because I would be assuming that this is kind of a marketing effort. So, But at the very least, we are seeing that it is a properly squashing, like GPT 4.0, and interesting, like DeepSeek new version. I guess we don't have that much information, but it seems to be like on the same level of it. But it does have at least some limitation like the context window. And this Maverick is matching Gemini 2 Flash's context window. So it pretty much just looks like Meta's Gemini 2 Flash with one extra feature that we'll talk about later. And when it comes to Scout, I would argue that it's by far the closest to Gemini 2 Flash Lite, even feature-wise, because Gemini Flash Lite has a 1 million context window, but LLaMA 4 Scout has a 10 million context window. And even price-wise, it's close. And in this case, I would argue that the other models are not super relevant here because they have a more limited context window and they tend to be more expensive. And possibly, at least for me, the Behemoth model would be the least interesting of the bunch. Although it's certainly not bad, but they're competing it against Gemini 2 Pro and GPT 4.5, which are not great models. And arguably, Claude 3.7 is decent, but it's more of a coding model, so they're kind of managing to beat it in many aspects. So Gemini 2 Pro scoring 36, and LLaMA 4 Behemoth is scoring 49. That would, based on Aether, put the new Behemoth about on the level of the 3.5 Sonnet. Maybe the old V3, but let's not use that. And in this case, they are not even offering a 1 million context window. So I guess we'll see. But Behemoth is more of a work in progress model. It's currently not even available. On Hugging Face, we can see that they are trending quite heavily. So these are open source. That's definitely a very strong selling point, although you would need somewhat beefy GPU to run them. But keep in mind that they released somewhat recently. So it would be possible that someone finds a way to run them cheaper, essentially. So if we go on Open Router, we can see Maverick at the price of 0.2 in and 0.6 out, which is not bad, but keep in mind its main competitor would be Gemini 2 Flash, which is a 0.1 in and 0.8 out, 0.4 out, I mean. And arguably for most use cases, Gemini 2 Flash should be the choice, but it does have one shortcoming, potentially, compared to Maverick, that although the context window is 1 million, the output is only 8K, which is absolutely not the case for Maverick. So we can see here that although, well, it's fast too. So it's pretty much exactly like Gemini, but the output window is also 1 million. And I must somewhat emphasize how special that is, because we can use some popular models here, like Claude 3.7, and the output is only 128K. Of course, it could be less too. There could be like cheaper providers here, or just simply worse providers. We can see DeepSeek at 130, the other DeepSeek at 160, and even the big guns these days, Gemini 2.5 Pro, literally the smartest model these days, output is only 66K, which is absolutely not a problem if your output fits in that window. But suppose you wanted to ask AI to write your book, you're not gonna get a book. In fact, you cannot even really have it write your book necessarily, at least not in one go. You can just ask for chunks. So even best case scenario, you would be like, look at all the context, then generate like 60K or something, or whatever you have, then look at all the context, generate something, look at all the context, generate something. Also, if it can't really stitch it together, so the maximum you can have is like 66K. Which again, in my experience, for most use cases, it's totally fine. But if you wanna generate a big output in one go, then Maverick is a pretty uniquely good choice, and also a very smart AI. I don't particularly have a use case for it. Guys, brainstorm a little bit in the comments. But as I said, one of the most obvious examples would be that you can one-shot generate an entire book with it, if these numbers are correct. Which Gemini 2 Flash is actually absolutely terrible at it. Because you have a 1 million context, sure, but your output tokens are only 8K. Yet their other model would be LLaMA 4 Scout. And we can see that the price is 0.1 in and 0.3 out, which is pretty much the same price as Gemini 2 Flash Lite, which actually has the same limitation as Gemini 2 Flash. So 1 million context window, pretty cool, but the output is only 8K, if that matters. But in this case, the argument is even stronger, because it is as smart as Gemini 2 Flash Lite, it is pretty much the same price. In fact, arguably it's gonna cost less if you need to continuously read a big context to finally generate a proper answer. So even suppose stitching it together is totally fine, you would still need to read possibly the 1 million context. Let's suppose if you want to generate a 100,000 sized output, like you would need to do it like 13 times. And in case of LLaMA 4 Scouts, you can just go 1 million context in and out, while being pretty much the same price. And as I argued, it's going to be realistically cheaper if you need more than 8K, because you would need to be rereading the input to generate the output. Yeah, truly the main limitation would be that trying to stitch together outputs is not that easy. I guess you can try to do it manually, but that would not be that much in the spirit of using AI. Oh, but we do see one thing, that the context window is only 1 million in and out. So apparently it's capable of 10 million, but presumably they don't have the hardware, because apparently, like, yeah, we can see that others are offering less too. So yeah. Yeah, to run these things, you kind of need the metal. And also keep in mind, because these models are free, anyone can just spin one up. So if anyone can find a way to provide them for cheaper, then that's just going to be a plus. And the only way Gemini 2 Flash is going to be cheaper if Google decides to make it cheaper. And by the way, not just cheaper too, because we can see another service here, Grok, that doesn't care too much about the context here. But their main thing is that they try to make the experience kind of quick, very responsive. So they have 660 tokens per second, which doesn't matter too much unless you absolutely need it. But you don't even have the option with the Gemini series. So that's it. So, judgment time. LLaMA 4 Scout. Arguably the better Gemini 2 Flash Lite. Maybe the better Gemini 2 Flash 2. In fact, it's very uniquely positioned. Where, especially if you don't care about intelligence that much, it is pretty much unbeatable. It is fairly affordable. Apparently might have like 10 million context window in the future if someone figures out how to do that. But even right now, you have the 1 million in and 1 million out for only 0.1 in price-wise and 0 free out. So, not bad. And Maverick would be just a slaughter and an easy win against the Gemini 2 Flash if they actually priced it the same as Gemini 2 Flash. But currently, if you care about output tokens at all, pretty much, because Gemini only has 8K and Maverick has 1 million, then Maverick slaughters. And it's not even close. And it's certainly gotta be more cost efficient. And apparently, according to the people, Maverick also has good vibes. And about Behemoth, we don't know, right? Not yet. We just know that they're working on something intelligent. But let me just emphasize at the very end that I'm pretty happy with this release, because they released a model that is pretty good commercially. This is just a replacement for Gemini 2 Flash Lite, and arguably, if you don't need intelligence, this is an amazing model for a very good price. Now, just to be clear, it's still pretty dang intelligent, and almost certainly gonna be just efficient and just suffice for most use cases. And I think the AI industry is a little bedazzled by intelligence, because all I really care about is having an AI that is useful for me, right? In some cases, this might be intelligence all the way, but often so, you might need some kind of balance, or you might care about other attributes, like they're going with context window here. Love to see it. Not only context window in, but context window out, and apparently it might have 10 million context window eventually. And Maverick is a decent model in its own right, but it is kind of uniquely positioned as a pretty smart model with a 1 million output and input context window. Although I'm not sure we should be calling the output tokens as a context window. But no matter. The point is, this was not really a thing that we had before. Realistically, about 130k output was the top when it came to actually relevant models. And now it's 1 million. Of course, this kind of opens up the function or not. Like, at one point, you could have only 10-second songs, if you can call it songs. Then you could have like 15-second songs. Then you can have like 30-second songs. Then you could have 3-minute songs and 5-minute songs. Now, that's not too bad. And then what people did is like, oh, I can make like 3 or 5-minute songs. Whoa, that's not bad. We can already use this. Of course, you couldn't just stitch together like 10-second songs and call it a song. That would not work. So increased tokens are not a percentage improvement in most cases, but actually unlocks use cases. So that's it. I'm liking these new llamas.